What's up, everybody? Welcome to a fresh episode of Floyd Street's Finest, a Louisville basketball podcast as part of the Field of 68 Media Network. I'm Jeff Greer, your host, your friend. I've got a great episode this week for you guys, a conversation with Louisville assistant and former Delaware legend, Mike Pegues. I know I used the word legend a lot, but we've had so many great episodes and guests on our show. They're all legends in some way, shape, or form with the people they've impacted and the programs they've impacted. So I don't use that word lightly. He averaged 20 and 7 over his final 3 seasons at Delaware, went to the NCAA tournament, still has apparently a couple of moves in his bag that, as I say in our interview, would make Kevin McHale proud. Nevertheless, before we get to that, I have to ask you a couple of things. One, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already to the Floyd Street's Finest podcast. Go on there, wherever you get your podcast, whatever platform, Spotify, Apple, wherever, go on there, smash the subscribe button, rate and review it. That is the only way that our content shows up for other people who don't know about us yet, in addition to you telling your friends who are also Louisville fans, or maybe they just want to follow Louisville. We have so many other great podcasts, Indiana, Kentucky, some team-specific ones in the ACC as well as our national guys, Robbie Hummel, Jeff Goodman, Rob Doster. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast network. Find us on YouTube also. There's extra content there that's awesome as well. It's the only way that we can keep expanding and keep doing cool stuff as part of the media network. One other request for you, and this is a personal one just for me. I just started a Louisville basketball newsletter. So you can go on to jeffgreer.substack.com and click on any of the posts that I have already put up. It'll give you an option to subscribe. That way you can get some great in-depth, insightful stuff that I've been putting together as I watch Louisville play these games, talk to the coaches and players, sit in on press conferences, all that stuff. I try to distill it down into a few important nuggets that are really helpful for people to know when they're watching their team and things to look for and things you can maybe break out at the water cooler or I guess on Zoom meetings whenever you're meeting with your coworkers and talking about basketball before things really turn professional in the conversation. Nevertheless, your interest is greatly appreciated, and thank you so much to the people who have already subscribed to the newsletter and to the podcast. Without further ado, here's my guy, Mike Pegues, Louisville assistant, in what is a really good conversation, I think, talking about Louisville basketball, but also we get to hear some good Mike Bray stuff in there too, his former coach at Delaware. That guy is fantastic. So enjoy the interview, and we'll talk to you next week. All right, we are joined by Mike Pegues, assistant coach at the University of Louisville, and also a Delaware Blue Hens legend, which is a very important thing to toss in there. Before we even get into Louisville, I really feel like you got to let people know. I mean, you averaged like 20 and 7 at Delaware. You had a lot of success there. Mike Bray was your coach. How much do the younger guys know about the baller that Mike Pegues was back in the day?
Well, quite honestly, as I've gotten older, I've learned to talk a little more about myself. You got to cherish those moments, those memories. They are fading more and more every day. So every now and again, I'll share some stories with our guys, about some of the things that I did. But they all pretty much know that I scored over 2,000 points. That's my big number. I try to remind them of that every now and again when we're messing around, going one-on-one and, fooling around in practice a little bit. But no, it's rough because I don't really have any evidence to back it up. I'd have to fire up the VHS, just for them to actually see anything. So sometimes it's a little bit of a struggle. It's not like they can go right on YouTube or Sports Center to see my work. So,
yeah.
But no, we joke about it a little bit. Obviously, I played in a different era where, 6'5" guys played underneath the basket and weren't allowed to step out as much. And now the game has totally changed. So, we have some good times talking about stuff like that, though.
Is there still a go-to move that has stuck with you all these years that you can still pull on your guys if you're messing around with them?
Yeah, I still think the old up and under that I would use back in the day because I couldn't jump over a telephone book, so I had to have an arsenal of moves and footwork and be able to use both hands, and I had to have all the tricks. So I still think I got a pretty good sell on my up and under, and my crossover isn't dead yet. It's got a little life to it. So, I mess around with them. Those are probably my two go-to moves: my crossover, my up and under.
Okay. Kevin McHale would be very proud of you with the up and under. I like that. Well, before we get into
He should. That's where I got it from.
well, before we get into to Louisville, I got to ask. I mean, you're in the same conference with him now. Your old coach, Mike Bray. What is your fit for publication? What is your favorite Mike Bray story that, like, if we were at a Christmas party or something, somebody said, "Hey, tell me about Bray."
Oh man, it's probably a handful of them I could choose from. Not many fit for publication. The one that really stands out to me just goes to show you the investment that he had in us and how much he loved us and loved winning was my senior year. We were expected to be really good, and we were, but unfortunately, we had some starters deal with some injuries that kept them out of the lineup from one game to the next. And there was a particular stretch where we had to play two of the tougher teams in our league. Back then, it was the Old America East. It's not the CAA that Delaware is in now. So we had Drexel and we had Hofstra and all in the same league. And so we had to play at Drexel and at Hofstra. And we knew going into that weekend it was going to be tough to win both games on the road. We were actually even thinking in the back of our minds that we can get a split. So we go to Drexel. We're down the whole game. It's our rival. It's a huge deal. And, we found a way to come back. And I actually hit a shot that won us the game, one of the few game winners I ever had. So we're in the locker room going crazy as players. We ripping our jerseys off, water's going all over the place. And the next thing you know, Mike Bray comes in and he like literally rips his dress shirt off, like buttons flying everywhere. Tank top underneath just rips it off like Hercules style, and he's jumping up and down in the crowd with us. And we're all hugging, and it was like a regular season game. It was a big game. We knew it, but it wasn't the championship. It wasn't the game to go to the NCAA tournament, but it just showed how much, he loved us and how much he loved to compete and win. And he shared the same passion and joy and competitive spirit that we all had. And that made us a really good group back there.
Well, the Bray stories are endless. I mean, we could probably do a whole podcast talking about Mike Bray. He's one guy I will always commend as a media type. Always responds to text messages. He'll talk if he has time. He's always really generous with his time and loves Louisville also. Loves coming to visit Louisville. Well, let's talk about the current team. And especially I wanted to pick your brain working with the bigs. I know you spend a lot of time with them, both in individuals and in team practice when you're working with them. Where does that position group stand right now, do you think, so far into the season?
Well, I would like to think that we've gotten better. I set out June because of concerns with COVID. And I didn't get back in the gym with those guys until August when school started. And so I would like to think, and that was literally the first time I had ever shook hands with Big Gabe, Big Wiz, as we like to call him at times. And, I hadn't seen Aiden, in months, and Jalen, and obviously Malik was there initially, but he winds up going down and needing a surgery. JJ Trainer is the first time that I had an opportunity to get with him on the court. And so I think since then, those guys have all collectively gotten better. Now, have they gotten to the point in their careers this season where we feel absolutely great about them? Not just yet. They all have a ways to go. I think that the most growth has probably been with Jalen Withers. His play has been erratic at times, but he's shown that he can compete in this league, even out of position. Jalen's more naturally a forward, and we have to play at the 5 because of, obviously Malik being down. And I think he's done a decent job at trying to hold his own and carve out his own niche on both ends of the floor and utilize his strength to neutralize the size of some of the other big guys that we face. But he's shown a lot of potential, for a guy that, is essentially still a freshman. He's a redshirt freshman. Last year didn't play. He's getting his first taste of it this year, albeit out of position. I think he's started to grow into that role more and more every day. But I've certainly seen growth in JJ as well. He's a kid who we weren't sure if he was going to play this year or not. Same with Gabe. And, I know that Gabe doesn't play much, but we've seen him get better, drastically better through practice, as well as JJ. JJ had some really good games early on. Starting to hit a little bit of a wall in terms of his effectiveness in the last few games, but he's a kid that we won't allow to play soft, even though he's thin. And he's a tough kid. We're just trying to help him find spots where he can utilize his skill set, again, out of position. And so he stepped up to the challenge. And I think that, when you look forward, and I know nobody wants to, talk about next season or, everybody wants it right now. And trust me, so do we. We want to go back and beat Florida State last night. But I think down the road this year with Jalen and JJ in particular having to play, JJ having to play period, and both of them having to play out of position and wrestle with big guys and things of that nature. I think that's going to really serve them both really well down the road as you look at their careers over time.
Well, I want to get more into that, into those guys in particular in a second. But first, something that you mentioned that I think a lot of people have underappreciated or not quite grasped the importance of. It really does matter, like you said, that you missed out on a summer, like a real summer, because, I know you always hear about teams going on like whitewater rafting trips or rope courses or team building exercises of all these different things. And especially in the specific position groups where coaches really get to work one-on-one with guys way more. That was wiped out this summer. How much different has that aspect of all of this been just in terms of relationship development?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great point, Jeff. I think the summer for any basketball player is always a critical time where you can separate yourself and really determine how the winner looks for you. You're able to get in the gym with your coaches, with your teammates, play a ton of pickup. Play one-on-one, two-on-two, get with your coaches, work on your weaknesses, enhance your strengths, get in the weight room, do a lot of different things. And obviously there were so many restrictions around how much we could be with those guys, when they could be in the weight room, when they couldn't, when they could be in the facility at all. So that certainly hampered guys' development. And as far as the, being able to get to know each other better and spend quality time, personal time with one another. Last summer, for instance, our whole team was able to go up to Coach Mack's lake house, and spend a weekend and do some team bonding and talk about, who guys, what their backgrounds were like, what it was like growing up, what their families are like. And obviously we didn't get that opportunity this year because of everything that went on. And so, this is a brand new team for us. When you look at our roster, and again, I know that, Louisville Nation's probably disappointed with the 2 losses as we are, but this is a really young team. And so anytime you take time away from a young team where they can bond and get to know each other and grow and get better, it curbs the development, and that's obviously something that we can't allow, to affect us now. We're here, it is January, so we got to go. But that certainly didn't help.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that I would wonder about is the and Coach Mack talked about this last night, the energy level. How do you coach energy? And it's obviously a little bit different with guards versus bigs, but for you, what's that conversation like with your guys of trying to get maybe light a fire under them a little bit more so, even when you haven't had as much time to develop that relationship so they really get where you're coming from at all times?
Yeah, I mean, every day we try to talk to our guys about having the right level of energy, having the right voice, having a voice, having a presence in practice. If you're physically out of a drill, you're mentally in a drill, you're emotionally in a drill. If you're watching, and your teammate is getting a rep, I mean, you talk about active listening, like you should be watching everything that they're doing, what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and you should be invested in not only your rep, but your teammates' rep.
Mhm.
And, again, being in the drill and having a voice and having some pop to you. And, that's something that quite honestly with a young team tends to come and go. I don't think that young guys really understand the value of that. They just think that it's, uh, a talking point that coach is making, and it's not as valued by younger guys. It normally is an older guy who can really understand the importance of that cohesive energy. You know what I mean? And guys constantly talking and helping each other and using each other, and we need more of that from these young guys. We need them to understand that more. We need them to understand not only how important that is in the game, but how important it is in practice every day. Because if that's not who we are in practice every day, then we certainly can't expect to be that on the game floor. And I think that they understand that, but again, it wavers at times, and that's our job as coaches to make sure that that standard that does not drop.
Yeah. And I mean, it's tough. All the guys you're mentioning, with the exception of Aiden, didn't play at all last year. So, I mean, that's like, I mean, this is trial by fire for three of the
Yeah,
four guys you're using.
right.
And now the fourth guy is injured. So the guy who had at least some experience from last year is also out with Malik.
Right.
Um, how important was it for you, and you guys that you've been in, I know you and Luke both have been in with Mac for a little bit longer than just Louisville, so you know the system really well.
Mhm.
Something that I've always noticed is you guys tend to recruit kids who can play multiple roles. I don't want to say positions, just because positions have become sort of old now, old fashioned, but guys like Jalen Withers who can handle, who can step out, he can be comfortable on the perimeter, he can play inside. JJ Trainer, of course, is the same. And how do you coach them to be big guys while
Yeah,
not losing that other aspect of their game, that skill set?
that's a great question, Jeff. I struggle, not struggle, but I grapple, with that every day because first of all, I tell any big guy that's working with me on my end, like, this isn't about me trying to turn you into, Charles Barkley, Karl Malone. I want every big guy that I work with to be an all-encompassing big guy that can do a little bit of everything, handle the ball, shoot the ball, post up, rebound, protect the rim, all of the responsibilities that any big guy, regardless of size or weight, should possess. So I want multifaceted big guys that have high IQs that can play in all different spots on the floor. And I think that that's the charm for Jalen and JJ, that although I have them doing some physical stuff with their back to the basket and doing some things that they don't normally do, they know that then the next segment, I'll have them facing up, picking and popping and shooting threes, or I'll have them handling the ball a little bit in some capacity or driving the ball. So for me, there's a give and take. Like, hey, we're going to work on the things that you like, you know what I mean, the things that you do well. But if it's a responsibility of a big guy, we got to, and even though you may not be used to it, we have to work on that as well. So I have them ducking in, and you got JJ, who's, I feel like 200 pounds is doing him a favor. You got him ducking in against the pad, against the GA, and trying to be physical and dunk the ball around the rim. And it's like, hey, that skill doesn't have anything to do with weight. It has everything to do with toughness and being nasty. Like, you can be a skinny kid and be nasty. You don't have to be 260 pounds to walk around with your chest poked out. You just got to have that mentality of being a tough kid, regardless of how much you weigh. So those are the types of values and teaching points that I'm trying to instill in those guys. And it's a work in progress. It's something that obviously gets better with time. As they get older, the more they hear it, the stronger they get. But it's definitely a seed that we've been trying to plant ever since they've been on campus.
Yeah. And look, I mean, it is another one of the other things that, again, if you're not involved in this every day, you probably don't realize, like, the difference between playing the four, especially in Mac's system, is so significant from the five. Like, I mean, the four is more similar to the three than it is to the five.
Right.
And you're talking about guys who I assume over time will probably be more used to playing the four. once you're able to get everybody healthy. Tell me about Malik Williams and his value. Obviously, not having him going through reps and leading the way by example this year probably hurts a lot. But his vocal side, his leadership side, what has he meant to you on staff, and what has he brought to the team, I guess, this year, even as he's out?
Yeah, no, obviously a huge void. He leaves a huge void on our front line. He's our biggest guy. He's our biggest guy in terms of, Gabe is physically the biggest guy, but he's our biggest guy with the experience, with the voice, with the feel for, what it takes to be successful in this league. He's a leader. He's a captain. We lose at Miami the other night, and we come in the locker room, and coach's locker room is next to the players' locker room, and you hear Malik's voice. He's the guy that's trying to encourage guys and get guys to understand why we lost tonight and what we can ill afford to do in future games if we expect to win. And he has a great feel for how this thing works. What it means, what a good practice looks like, what a good practice sounds like, what a good rep looks like, what a good segment in practice looks like. And, we miss that. We miss his voice. We miss his presence on the floor. We obviously miss, I think, quite honestly, that Malik could have challenged for Defensive Player of the Year in the ACC this year. I think that he has that type of effect on the game defensively, and I also think that he was getting better offensively. I think that he was really starting to find his niche. When I got here a couple of years ago, Malik was not very well-versed, we'll say, playing with his back to the basket and in the post. I think that was still something that he was trying to figure out. And I think over time, battling and wrestling with Steve every day, he started to find his groove, and you would see, glimpses in games where he would catch the ball in the post and do some good things with it and face up and do some good things. And I was really, really excited about building on that, so not only do you lose a guy that had the potential of being a Defensive Player of the Year in the league, but you lose a guy that was probably going to get you double-digit points and play a lot better for you on offense and give you a viable threat in the lane, which is where we struggle to have a presence, a lot of times because of our lack of size and depth. So you miss a lot there, and we're hopeful that in the next, few weeks or to a month or so, however long it may be, that we can get Malik back, and he'll be ready to go. And obviously you love to have him on the floor as opposed to over there on the bench.
Yeah. Well, I remember when he was a freshman, he loved, and even coming in as a recruit, they had the Derby Festival Classic or whatever it was called, All-Star Game. And during any shoot around, during a lot of the game stuff, he always wanted to shoot threes. He always wanted to fade to the 3-point line and shoot threes. And you have seen for sure that progression of being a lot more comfortable catching in the post and trying to go into some of his moves. The one thing that really impressed me last night, and we're recording this on Tuesday after the Florida State game, while the coaches were talking things over before going to the timeout huddle, Malik Williams was already talking to the players and directing them clearly. I think defensively, especially, was trying to communicate with them, where they need to be, what types of stuff, how to be more connected, that kind of stuff. And if it's obvious to me, then clearly you guys are going to know all about that.
Yeah. No, that's common practice for Malik. Not only in huddles at games, but in practice, he's always talking to Jalen and JJ and Gabe in particular about, certain things that they could do better, what he sees, from the sideline, and, trying to give them some little nuggets to help them out and mature even faster. So he's been great. He's been about as good as you can be with street clothes on. So we're all just looking forward to him putting the uniform back on soon so we can get some of that experience that he has and that talent that he brings on the floor.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I mean, the expectations for Aiden were very high coming in. I mean, a lot of fans, I'm sure you remember all the Irish flags at Louisville Live and all that stuff. What is his next step? What's missing for him right now that might be able to help him take that next step to be more effective?
Yeah, well, it goes without saying that Aiden has battled some injuries that has not helped his development. He's had a heart condition, a growing, a knee. He's had it all, it seems like. And even right now, he's dealing with a growing issue. We think that he'll be able to practice sometime this week. So we're hopeful for that. But I think that, some of those expectations were obviously tied to his ranking. And, as we've all found in years past, rankings don't necessarily guarantee a ready-made impact player. You can be ranked in the top 30, top 20 even, and show up to campus, depending on what campus and what league that is or what team that is, and just not be ready to give your team as much as people expect. And I think that for Aiden, he was a kid that, came in, he didn't determine those expectations. They were kind of determined for him by the media, by our fan base. And I think that if we were all being honest, we would say that he was a kid that needed time. He needed some time to catch up to the speed of the game. I think that things, especially last year and even coming into this year, were moving incredibly fast for him. When you put him in a box, in a one-on-one segment, some of the talent and athleticism will shine, and you can see it. But when it's 5-on-5 and it's congested and you have to run plays and you have to execute different things, and you have to have a feel for how to play off of one another and, move without being, nothing is scripted, right? You just have to play and feel like Aiden didn't have as much experience coming in as maybe people thought he did in that capacity. His feel, his natural feel for the game, his ability to adjust and adapt on the fly, like all of those things needed a lot of time and growth. And they're not always very easy to teach, to be quite honest. Teaching a feel for the game to any player is tough. And you would almost prefer that a player bring a certain level of that to the floor. And Abe brought a certain level, but I don't think it was at the level that it needed to be in order to be successful at this level. This is the highest level, And you take a kid that hadn't played a ton of basketball. You got kids that have been playing since they were 6 years old. You got grown men out there that some of them are 24, 23 years old, and not only are they big and strong like him, but they know how to use their bodies. You know what I mean? They're a little more skilled. They're a little more savvier. And those players that, really tend to take advantage of Aiden, both in practice and in games. And so the standard, the expectation, I think for him was set probably a little too high. And he's a guy that still needs to grow and get a lot better and learn a lot more about the game before he can impact it the way that we would all like him to.
Yeah. Well, I keep reminding people, he was literally plucked off a soccer field when he was like 14 years old. So This is, and had no idea even how to dribble a basketball. So I think when you put it in that context, like Louisville had a kid, Mango Mathiang, who came through their program before you guys were here. And first couple of years, he didn't know where to be on offense, especially. He had trouble catching the ball, all this stuff. And then he ended up making an NBA roster and has had a long-running career now in Europe. And it's because as he got older, you could tell he could understand the game, and it wasn't so fast for him. Like you said, things weren't kind of whizzing around him. I always think of that SpongeBob meme where he's spinning and it's all blurry behind him.
Right.
But, well, I'll let you get out of here on this last question. You mentioned a couple of guys earlier, Karl Malone, Charles Barkley. I mentioned Kevin McHale. As a big guy who I'm sure still has a great appreciation for other big guys in their games. And I'll tell you mine first, but who is your all-time favorite big guy? And it could be at the college or pro level. And mine, I'll tell you, is DeJuan Blair. My alma mater. I know I told you that before one of the games up there a couple of years ago. That's my alma mater. And just talking about guys who are just nasty, when they're on the floor. He's a nice guy off the floor, but just super nasty, powerful, physical guy. Always loved watching him play. So who's your favorite big guy over the years?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I would have to say for me, because I was so undersized, even though our vertical leaps weren't anywhere in the same ballpark Well, for me, it would have been Charles Barkley,
Mhm.
just because I've seen him in person. He's not even 6'6" like they claimed he was. He's 6'4". And to think, of all the things that he did in his career, and the bigger guys that he competed against, the McHales, the Karl Malones, the Duncans later in his career, like to be able to, score the ball and rebound the ball the way that he did over those guys, that was always a guy that I looked to for inspiration and like, hey, if he can do it, I can figure out a way too. So he would have been the guy for me. But obviously, that's a tough question for me, Jeff. Obviously, I have an affinity for post guys and big guys, and it's a ton of them that I love watching growing up. Malone, Barkley, Duncan, to name a few, and now in current day, I love a guy like the Joker and Anthony Davis, Joel Embiid. So it's good to see that the big guys are still hanging in there. They're trying to run us out of the game, but now to be a really good big guy, you got to be able to shoot the three and handle the ball a little bit. So it's good to see current day big guys modifying their games and expanding their games and finding a way to stay in a guard's game now.
Well, I'll leave you with this. I was a kid in Amherst, Massachusetts. I was like 6 or 7 years old, and we pulled up to a stoplight, and this hatchback, tiny clunker of a car pulled up next to us. And with his knees folded up against his chest in the front seat was Marcus Camby, who was probably my number 2 favorite big guy of all time.
Yeah.
And it was in that very moment that I had a great appreciation for big guys, because it's just, life just is never easy for you guys. You got to earn every step. So, but hey, I appreciate your time, man, so much. It's great to chat with you, and glad to see you're doing all right.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jeff. I appreciate it, man. You have a good one.
All right. Thanks.